this time, I'm going to introduce Christine Cave, and she will be discussing the rules of competition.
Good morning, everyone. How many of you all have competed in this program before? Oh, yay. All right. Well, that's exciting. It's nice to see you here, and it's nice to see so many new students participating. I get the exciting honor of presenting the rules of competition, which I know you all drove so far this morning just so you could start your morning with that. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me, before we get into the rules of competition too far, just give you just a brief overview for those of you who are new, just in how this works. We are all members of the mock trial committee. We do everything from writing the problem that you all will be looking at. It'll come out here in less than a month. Anyone excited? Okay, less than a month and the problem will come out. So we develop the problem. We also develop and work on rules of competition, the rules of evidence, and we work to put on the actual logistics of the program. As Judy mentioned, we try and coordinate all of those volunteers so that you have people who are there to judge and whatnot. During the actual competition season, we're a little bit reserved from you all in the sense that we're kind of running the program piece. But the lucky team that wins and becomes state champions, then we step in and we work with that team to help develop, and we accompany them to nationals. So Clinton's here in the front row. They've been the last 2 years, so they know how hard we like to work them so that Oklahoma is well represented on the national level. So that's kind of what we do. So if you don't see us, you won't see us as much during the actual competition because we're a little bit behind the scenes. But all right, so we're going to move into the really exciting rules. Our rules of competition deal with everything from who gets to compete, what schools can compete, what students can compete, to what happens during the trial. And one of the reasons, somebody tell me why the rules of competition, why you should care and why you should pay attention in the next 10 minutes. Yes? So you don't accidentally break one. And because what might happen? What might happen if you have a rule violation? You get a penalty points, or you could be disqualified, which would kind of suck if you had gone through all of this through the season and you were no longer able to compete. So they do kind of matter, yes. Or you might lose a competition and be unable to advance in the competition. So one of the things our rules allow is for you all to get together with one another before the competition actually starts and scrimmage. That means that you guys can call a school from a neighboring town and actually go and compete against each other. You can do that as many times as you would like. The only thing that we tell you is that there is no guarantee you won't meet that team during the competition. So there is always a possibility you'll see that particular team again. But you are able to do that. If you need help doing that, you can contact us. We sometimes will have schools reach out to us. So after the scrimmage rounds, you'll go into qualifying rounds. All of you will get an opportunity to present your case twice, once for the plaintiff or the prosecution and once for the defense. And so in the qualifying rounds, the winners of the qualifying rounds under our rules will automatically advance to the quarterfinals, in which you'll also get an opportunity to present both sides of your case. The teams from there will then go on to the semifinals. You will not necessarily have the opportunity to present both sides of your case during that competition because it is a power match competition. And then, of course, the winner goes on to finals, so on and so forth. So I want to take just a little bit for those of you all who are going to be going through this the first time, just maybe lower the anxiety bar about stuff that doesn't matter. You're going to be focused on your trials. So when you walk into the courtroom that first day, you want to have in hand roster sheets that say who is playing what role. That's important because you give that to the other side, and that will tell the other side our roles are intended to be gender neutral. So it might tell you if you're going to be calling it Mr. Smith or Ms. Smith. It also is something that will be passed along to the scoring panelists so that they will remember your name and remark about what an outstanding job you did, maybe nominate you for the best attorney or the best witness. There are provisions in our rules for dress and decorum. This is in a courtroom, and so you would be dressing accordingly. If you have, for instance, any issues with respect to access to appropriate dress, please contact us. There are lots of closets where lawyers have donated suits and other appropriate professional wear across the state. So if you have any issue with that, please contact us. All right, so let's talk about I know this sounds really itty, but who sits where? You're going to walk into the courtroom. How many of y'all have, okay, my new competitors, who has never been in a courtroom? Okay, we've got a handful of people who've never actually been in a courtroom. So you're going to walk into the courtroom, and what you're going to look for is obviously you're going to see where the judge sits, but you're going to look for where the jury sits, because that's what's going to be your frame of focus. If you figure out where the jury sits, then if you're presenting the prosecution or the plaintiff's side of the case, you're going to sit at the table that looks the closest to it, okay? Look for that table. And then if you're a defense, look for the table that's farther away from that. So then you know where you're supposed to sit and you can walk confidently up there. If you're playing the witness and you arrive at the courtroom early enough, take the time to go stand up there or sit up there in the witness stand so you know if you're going to have any issues. Sometimes those chairs rock, and you want to figure out if you can make it stop rocking, because it's actually really obnoxious to watch from the scoring panelist point of view if you're just seeing witness just kind of rock back and forth. Okay, so you're going to figure out who sits where. So the time has come for the trial. So you've got a couple things in our rules that you need to be aware of. Obviously, you've got attorneys. How many of y'all have played an attorney role before? Okay, we're going to write 8 roles for attorneys. There are 8 available attorney roles. You must have a minimum of 3 attorneys. Okay, so you can have as few as 3 and as many as 8. And so that's going to be up to you all. We're going to talk about penalties here in just a few moments and the things you want to avoid doing. But one of the reasons you have to have 3 attorneys is you must have a different attorney presenting opening than who presents closing. So you know you've got at least 2 there. And attorneys are limited to 2 examinations, meaning you can't just have someone do all of the directs and all of the crosses. You only get to do 2. So that makes a minimum of 3 attorneys. All right, so you've got attorneys, you've assigned the attorney roles. How witnesses? How many people played witness roles? All right, you got 3. That's easy, right? So you're going to get 3. The problem will be written for 3, and all of them must be called. You cannot not call a particular witness. Couple things about you witnesses. Now, this relates to you attorneys as well. And one of the issues that we constantly have come up, you're going to get these witness statements, and the witness statements are not going to include everything, right? Witnesses in real life don't include everything in their witness statements. But you, if you are a witness, are bound by your witness statement. You are not bound by any other witness statement. So if your best friend said the light was green and you say the light is red, you're going to say the light is red. It doesn't really matter what your best friend said. Now, you're going to be questioned about it, but you are not bound by anything anyone else said. So that becomes important. And then one of the other things that we tend to run into is this issue of what's called extrapolation. Because the witness statements don't say everything, you're going to have to kind of infer a few things, right? I mean, you're going to have to kind of fill in some gaps. Well, there is a fair extrapolation is okay. So, for instance, if it can be reasonably inferred from whatever the information you've been given about what your witness says, that's okay. If you make an extrapolation about something that's completely immaterial, it has no bearing on the issues to be decided in the case, that's okay. But if you completely make something up and it has a bearing on the case, you're going to get an unfair extrapolation, or you should get an unfair extrapolation objection. If you're on the other side and someone has completely made something up and it's material, if it's immaterial, let it go. If it's material, then you have to object at that point in time for extrapolation. Note that those immaterial differences can better be addressed by impeaching your witness. Well, you didn't say that in your witness statement, did you? So you're going to learn those skills, but know the difference between fair and unfair extrapolation. There's a provision in the rule. It's under Section 2F. That will tell you a little bit about what the committee has decided is extrapolation and unfair extrapolation. Okay, timekeeping. How many timekeepers do we got? I only have like 3 hands up. You guys are incredibly important. You get to sit in the jury box. You sit in the back of the jury box. Sometimes you'll be moved to another spot by the trial site coordinator, but your job is to keep time. One of the things you need to know in 2012 that we clarified in our rules, because we have such a concern about communication amongst, you're limited to communicating only to your teammates. And so we do not allow electronic devices basically behind the bar or above the bar. So that means for you timekeepers, you got to use the old-fashioned stopwatch or something, the little push-button ones, but you can't use your iPhone. Okay, so invest in the $10 little stopwatch or something else like that. So you cannot use that. If you have any issues when you're timekeeping, since there's going to be a timekeeper provided by either side, and you're going to have your little cards that starts counting down 20 minutes, 15 minutes, so on and so forth. And when you raise your card up, if you notice that your accompanying component from the other team is not raising at the same time, by the time that particular segment finishes, you guys need to alert the judge and check. If you're more than 15 seconds off, then you have to alert the judge, and the judge will make a determination about what is happening with time, because it's important, because there are some time limits, right? We don't let you all sit there and talk as long as you want. So unlike, and I practice primarily in federal court, we get little lights. Unfortunately, you guys don't get a light, but that might be better. They're a little intimidating to see that, know that you've got just a few seconds. But so you get 5 minutes each for opening statement, 20 minutes for direct examination, or your direct and your, 25 minutes for direct and redirect. And you get 20 minutes for cross and recross, and then 5 minutes for closing. So that's how much time, theoretically, the trial should take, roughly 2 hours apiece. Okay, we're going to talk more. Yes, sir. Yes. It is 5 minutes each side for opening, 25 minutes together for all 3 of your direct and redirect examinations, 20 minutes for your cross and recross, and 5 minutes each for closing. And you can find that in Section 4G in the Rules of Competition. All right, we're going to talk more about objections in a little bit, but I want to talk about protests specifically. So yes, there are things that you can do. Primarily, there are things you can do outside of the trial, but there are things that you can do during the trial that unfortunately are going to end up with you being assessed mandatory penalty points. So here are the things you absolutely want to avoid. First, you want to avoid going over the time limit. If you go over the time limit more than 15 seconds, okay, then you're going to start being assessed penalty points for every 15 seconds you go over. So from 16 to 30, you get a 15-second grace period. So, and you'll see in Section 6B2 all of the mandatory penalty assessments. But if you go over just 16 seconds, you're going to start accumulating. So 16 to 30 seconds is our 1 point. 31 seconds to 45 seconds. So on and so forth. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 1 point for each half a minute. Okay, so once you've gone over 15 seconds, you get that 15-second grace period, but there's rounding up and down, okay? So one point for each half a minute. So you want to make sure you're running on time. Secondly, and here's the one that's really the biggest one, and most people know to avoid this, but that's 20 points. So that's the equivalent of not having done 2 full examinations if the attorney gives the same opening and closing. Basically, we take away all your points for opening and closing if you do not use a different attorney for opening and closing. You get 4 points off if the attorney who is examining a witness is not the same attorney who's objecting. So if you're cross-examining the expert on the other side, you are the only person who can object to that expert's testimony. Okay? It doesn't matter if you miss the objection, the other person can't stand up, the other team member, and you get 4 points off for every time that happens, that someone else objects on your behalf. And last but not least, if there's any communication during the trial between the teacher coaches or spectators and the members of the team, it's a 10-point deduction. Those are all pretty easy for you all to avoid, so it's just good to know that those, and the scoring panelist and the judge has no discretion to avoid those. There are discretionary penalty points for other types of rule infractions, but those are strictly within the purview of the judge. After the trial is over, you will have an opportunity, once the scoring panelists have been dismissed, you will get 2 minutes to confer amongst yourselves. This is team members only, without any contact with the coaches. You'll get 2 minutes, and you'll decide whether or not you want to raise any rule violations. And you can present any violations at that point in time, and the other team will have an opportunity to respond, and the judge can determine whether any violation or penalty points will be imposed. Anything else? Okay, good. Yay, yes?
What about communication with your witnesses?
During the
trial, where's the line on that?
The team, the rules allow, I'm going to pull the actual communication rule. You can communicate, well, actually, the team says co-counsel. I don't know if we have one that just, we don't have a rule that specifically addresses witnesses. Co-counsel can definitely communicate during the trial. Just note that if you're being distracting to the scoring panelists, they will mark you down, frankly, because it'll be distracting from whatever the presentation is. So I don't have an answer because there's not a specific rule on it. Sorry.